I've been more than discourteous and critical of Boris Johnson. I'm reflecting, I'm not putting this out as a news statement, I'm putting this out as a question. Why are you supporting Boris Johnson, given that he's flying ahead in the polls at a time when many people might have thought he wouldn't be? The Conservatives have enjoyed a significant bounce since Wednesday's budget, despite the announcement of biggest tax rises in 30 years. That's genuinely intriguing. This was the YouGov poll that found the Tories establishing a 13-point lead over Labour, with their budget seen as the most popular in a decade. We'll get an economist perspective on this from Jeevan Sander in just a second. First, Lord Frank Field, former chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. Afternoon to you, Frank. Good to have you with us.
Afternoon to you.
You've been around the block a fair bit in politics. You know how these things work. I know we can't always trust polls, but what do you make of this? I mean, you're a Labour man, but here we have Boris Johnson, despite coronavirus, despite his own difficulties with Brexit, despite a budget that has announced tax rises, the likes of which we haven't seen for 3 decades. He's 13 points ahead in the polls. What's going on?
Well, I mean, there's a question about, people are forgiving always until there comes a point where the iron enters their soul. And I think Boris, if he remains lucky, and he's a lucky politician, we must remember that if he remains lucky, we'll find that we do get out of this terrible, terrible slough of depression from COVID, thanks to the whole business of the vaccines. I think people will forgive him. But the budget, I thought, was important in a number of really important respects, and I thought it was the best budget I'd heard in 42 years.
Seriously? Just give us a few pointers, Frank, as to why that was. What was it specifically you felt that he really hit the mark?
Well, first of all, it really dealt with the now. We've got a crisis on our hands. Money is continuing to be spent to make sure we all don't go down the plug hole with this terrible virus. But there will be taxes later, and when they come in, they would disproportionately hit the rich. Now, the tax statement, although not coming in quite as quickly as some people thought, is really important to reassure the money markets that we've not got an airhead as Chancellor of the Exchequer. The bills have got to be paid for at some stage. Yeah. That's the first reason. Cleverest budget in 42 years. Secondly, the Tories and the coalition introduced the most vicious little rule of resurrecting past debts that they say people owed them and clawing it back from their universal credit and other benefits. That has stopped. So a big cheer on that front. And thirdly, we keep being told universal credit uplift is going to end. He's extended it for another 6 months. We've clearly got to get it extended for good. And if they don't extend it for good, then any idea of levelling up is off the agenda. But, we've got another 6 months where poorer people kept their 20 quid. So they're just 3 of the reasons why I thought this was the most intriguing, impressive budget in my 42 years in Parliament.
Listen, Frank, it's always good to get your view on these things. Thank you. Lord Frank Field, former chair of Work and Pensions Select Committee. Let me just remind you, he was a lifelong Labour, still a Labour man, but Labour MP. And that's his analysis. Best in 42 years. Let's speak to Jeevan Sander, economist at King's College London, former Treasury official too. That was some endorsement, Jeevan, from a Labour politician. The best budget in 42 years. Do you concur?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here, Ian. And actually, I don't concur, but also for a reason that Lord Field just spoke of. So look, let's be absolutely clear. I think everyone who listens to this program would agree that no low-paid key worker, no nurse should see a fall in income after this pandemic. I think everyone would agree that no child in this country should be going hungry. And that's why the Chancellor's decision not to make the universal credit uplift permanent and not extend it to legacy benefits was disgraceful. That would mean a fall in income of £1,000 for those on low pay. And that would mean that, look, let's be clear, for any nurse to lose a penny after what they've been through, what my friends in A&E describe as hell, for any child to go hungry in this country is wrong. For those low-paid nurses to see £1,000 fall in income in 6 months' time, for there to be 1.7 million children going hungry in this country, that's abhorrent. So I think the decision not to make it permanent was more than a mistake. I think
But
it was a moral
you don't
failure.
necessarily.
And I don't believe.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I understand that view, Jeevan. But you don't necessarily eradicate all poverty. I mean, the poor are always with us. I can't remember whether it was Queen Victoria or Jesus said that, but there is that reality, right?
Food bank use was unheard of before 2010, Ian. But for today, to say that there should be some poverty or there will be some poverty is not the same as saying, well, let it all come out. 1.7 million children. I don't think anyone here thinks it's okay that 1.7 million kids, 1 in 7, are going hungry. I also don't think that the British values, that fair play and decency that we have, would say to us that a low-paid key worker from somewhere like Tower Hamlets, for example, where I live in London, they would also see a fall in income of £1,000 after this. I mean, we've seen today the furor over a 1% pay rise. Let's see what happens in 6 months' time with this budget when we start to see those pay cuts come in.
Of course, he could revisit the universal credit, the £20, as Frank Field was just alluding to.
I really hope he does. And if he did, I would be very, very happy. But at the moment, he hasn't given any indication he would. The rumours we're hearing from outside of the Treasury is that he didn't want to extend it at all. And the other thing I would say is there doesn't look to me to be a fiscal event in the next 6 months. I would have thought the spending review would have come around
that's true.
November time. So look, I hope he does come back and do it, and there'll be a lot of pressure to do so. But until he does, Ian, I'm going to be out there saying every single day, it is not acceptable for those nurses to get a pay cut, and it's not acceptable for children to be going hungry.
Isn't it? I mean, it's all rather seductive. I hear what you're saying, but it plays well to say, nobody wants kids to go hungry. There's no one in the world that would tick a box saying, yes, I'm absolutely fine with kids going hungry, and I want nurses to earn rubbish money. However, it's all a bit random as well, isn't it? I mean, if the universal credit number was £30, you'd be sitting here now on national radio and TV arguing for 30 quid because that's where it was set. The fact that it's 20 is a sort of an arbitrary number that you're endorsing because that's the number that's at play here. So there's a lot of politics in this, is the point.
I think this is about politics. I think it's about being human and not wanting to see kids starve. But I take the point here. But I always think that less poverty is better. So yeah, a £20 uplift, of course, that was what was brought in during the pandemic. I thought it should have been made permanent. We're now looking as well that after this is finished, the lowest level of unemployment-related social security levels since the early 1990s. And in 6 months' time, by the way, when the furlough scheme ends, we should expect another rise in unemployment too. So look, yes, £20, absolutely, because it means less poverty and it means less hunger. And Ian, when we win that fight, then we go on to the next one.
All right, and we should always fight and get what we think is right from governments. I agree with that, regardless of our politics. In terms of just a very final point, we've only got 20 seconds if you can. But in terms of his popularity, here he is, despite everything you've just said, he's 13 points ahead in the poll. He's right, you're wrong.
It's a very quick poll after a budget, and with the vaccine coming out, we are 4 years to the next election. I'm not at all surprised there's a poll bump today. I wouldn't be at all surprised that in 6 months' time, when we start to feel the effects of these cuts, that those numbers will begin to fall.
Jeevan, always good to have you on. Thank you, sir. Jeevan Sander, who's economist and former Treasury official. You hear what he had to say. Frank Field before that. Where are you on this one? Boris Johnson is 13 points ahead in the polls. This is huge right now, on the back of everything. And there was the irony. You just heard from Jeevan, the economist. Despite all of that, as he articulated it, as he defined it, people will interpret these things differently. Mr. Johnson's riding well ahead of the opposition. What is it about Boris? 0344 499 1000. It's